Corporate Files. Case number 002. Status ongoing. This is the story of a man who built a company from nothing and was legally erased from it before it sold for $50 million. $50 million. That's how much my co-founder made the day he erased my name from everything we built together. I got zero. Not a small cut. Not a bad deal. Zero. Because while I was working nights, skipping my daughter's birthdays, and maxing out every credit card I owned just to keep us alive, he was quietly, legally, signing papers that made me disappear. And the worst part, it was all my fault for trusting him. I'm holding the document right now, the one that ends with my share percentage, 0.00. My hands won't stop shaking. And somewhere across town, he is celebrating. But here's what he didn't count on. Let me take you back, because you need to understand who I was before any of this happened. Before I became someone who checks every contract 3 times and trusts almost no one. I was an engineer, self-taught mostly. Grew up in a house where money was always tight, and I watched my father work 2 jobs his entire life and still never get ahead. That image never left me. So I made a decision early. I was going to build something of my own, something real. For nearly a decade, I worked in tech, learned the business side on the job, made mistakes, fixed them, moved forward. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't connected, but I was relentless. And I had one idea that I genuinely believed could change how small businesses managed their cash flow. Simple software, powerful results. I've been sketching it out in notebooks for 3 years. All I needed was the right partner to help me build it. And that's when he walked into my life. His name was Daniel. And when I met him, I thought he was everything I wasn't. I was the builder. He was the seller. I could make a product that worked. He could walk into a room and make anyone believe in it. He had this energy, this absolute certainty that whatever he touched would succeed. And honestly, that certainty was intoxicating when you'd spent years grinding in the dark wondering if your idea was even worth anything. We met through a mutual contact at a small industry meetup. We talked for 3 hours that night. He had connections I'd never get on my own. Investors, advisors, people who returned his calls. I had the product. He had the network. On paper, it was a perfect split. We became friends fast. Real friends, I thought. Weekend dinners with our families. His kids and my daughter knew each other's names. He was the best man at my brother's wedding, for crying out loud. This wasn't a business arrangement. This was a brotherhood. So when we finally sat down to formalize everything, I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. But the paperwork itself, that was the second. Looking back now, the signs were there from the beginning. I just didn't want to see them. When we split equity, I pushed for 50-50. I'd built the core product. It only seemed fair. Daniel said he agreed. But then his lawyer sent over a document that had him at 55 and me at 45. He laughed it off, said it was a template error. I let it go. That's the thing about trusting someone. Every red flag looks like a misunderstanding. 6 months in, he started taking meetings I wasn't invited to. Investor calls. Advisor sessions. He'd brief me afterward, but only after. I told myself it was a division of labor. He handled the business side. I handled the product. That was the deal. Then one afternoon, his assistant accidentally copied me on an email thread that wasn't meant for me. It was a conversation between Daniel and one of our early investors. They were discussing ownership restructuring. I didn't know what that meant at the time. Daniel told me it was standard language for their fund's compliance paperwork. I believed him. I deleted the email. I actually deleted it. And for a long time, I thought that was just bad luck. But that email was a roadmap to exactly what was coming. About 18 months in, the product was working. Real customers. Real revenue. We were getting attention from serious acquirers. I remember thinking, we actually did it. This is real. But something had shifted with Daniel, and I couldn't name it. He started canceling our weekly check-ins. When we did talk, he was vague, distracted. He'd started hiring people. I'd never interviewed senior hires who reported directly to him, and barely acknowledged that I existed. My own company was starting to feel like somewhere I'd been invited to visit. I asked him directly one evening, "Are we okay?" Because it feels like something's off. He put his hand on my shoulder. He looked me in the eye. He said, "Brother, we're better than okay. This thing is about to pop." I went home and felt relieved. But 3 weeks later, I got a call from our company lawyer asking me to sign some routine administrative documents. Annual maintenance paperwork, she called it. I was busy, completely buried in a product update that was crashing under load. I asked her to just send them over, and I'd get to them that weekend. She said there was no rush. She sounded calm. Almost too calm. I should have asked more questions. Why didn't I ask more questions? I signed the documents that weekend. Didn't read them. All of them. I skimmed. I trusted. 3 months later, I got a notification from our cap table management platform. A system alert. Routine stuff, usually. I almost dismissed it. I didn't. I opened it. And what I saw made my stomach drop through the floor. My equity stake, which had started at 45% and had been diluted incrementally as we raised money, which was normal, which I expected, was listed at 0.00%. Not reduced. Not corrected. 0. I refreshed the page. Still 0. I went back through every document I'd ever signed. And that's when I found it. Buried in the administrative maintenance paperwork I'd barely read 3 months earlier was a consent to a preferred share restructuring. A restructuring that had issued a new class of preferred shares. Shares that I had no right to purchase under the anti-dilution protection. I thought I had shares that diluted every common shareholder to nothing. Shares that went almost entirely to Daniel and to one aligned investor. It was legal. Every signature was mine. Every initial was mine. And I had no idea what I'd agreed to. None. I sat in my kitchen for 4 hours. My daughter came downstairs and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. I was not fine. I had just discovered that I owned nothing. And somewhere in a boardroom I'd helped build, a sale was already being negotiated. I called him the next morning. He picked up on the second ring. That alone told me he was expecting it. I saw the cap table, I said. Just that. Silence on the other end. 3 full seconds of silence. And then he sighed. Not the sigh of a man who'd made a mistake. The sigh of a man who'd been caught. "We need to talk in person," he said. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral ground, I guess. He arrived looking composed. Polished. Like he was walking into a meeting he'd already won. He sat down, looked at me and said, "And I will never forget this," he said. "You were a technical founder. The business outgrew your role. This was the right move for the company. That was it." That was his explanation. Not an apology. Not a justification. A dismissal. I asked him how he could do this to someone whose daughter knew his kids' names. He looked down at his coffee. He said, "This isn't personal. This is business." I stood up. I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking the same way they're shaking right now, holding this document. I walked out. And in the parking lot, I sat in my car for 40 minutes. Then I made a decision that changed everything. The weeks after that meeting were the worst of my life. And I mean that without exaggeration. So at this point, here's where things stood. I had co-founded a company, worked on it for nearly 3 years, signed papers I didn't fully understand, and was now sitting on zero ownership while a $50 million acquisition was quietly being assembled around me. I was still technically employed there, a cruel irony, but I was a ghost. Nobody called me into the important meetings anymore. The ones I had helped make possible. I had $200,000 in personal debt from the years I'd funded us. Credit cards. A second mortgage I'd taken on my house. I'd borrowed money from my brother, who didn't have much to spare. All of it deployed into a company that I now had no stake in. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat properly. I lost 12 pounds in 6 weeks. My daughter started asking why I never laughed anymore. That question broke me in half. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed at 2 in the morning, thinking, maybe he was right. Maybe I deserved this. Maybe I was never the real founder. Maybe I was just the guy who wrote the code. I believed that. For a while, I actually believed that. And that was his greatest weapon against me. The turning point came on a Tuesday. Nothing special about that day. No dramatic sign from the universe. Just a Tuesday. My daughter left a drawing on the kitchen table before she went to school. It was the two of us. She'd written underneath it, "My dad builds things." I stood over that drawing for a long time. I thought about my father. 2 jobs his whole life. Never built anything for himself. Never had the chance to fight for something that was his. I had that chance, and I was letting it slip away because I was too ashamed and too exhausted to pick up the phone. So I picked up the phone. Not to call Daniel. Not to cry to a friend. I called a securities attorney, one who specialized in shareholder rights and equity disputes. I told him the whole story in one sitting. By the end, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said 6 words that changed my entire posture. "You may have a case here." I didn't know yet what that fight would cost me. I didn't know how long it would take. But I had decided. I was not going to disappear. My attorney's name was Marcus. And Marcus was methodical in a way that scared Daniel's team before they even knew what was coming. He told me the first thing we needed was documentation. Everything. Every email. Every Slack message. Every version of every agreement I'd ever signed. I spent 3 weeks pulling together years of files. And that's when I found something I'd completely forgotten about. In the very first version of our shareholder agreement, before Daniel's lawyers had cleaned it up, as they put it, there was a clause. A preemption rights clause. One that gave early common shareholders the right of first refusal on any new share issuance. A right that had never formally been waived by me in writing. A right that the subsequent restructuring may have violated. Marcus read it twice. Then he looked up and said, "They may have made a mistake. We also found the email thread. The one I'd accidentally deleted. Except I hadn't actually deleted it from the server. It still existed in a recoverable archive. That email showed Daniel and the investor discussing the restructuring 6 months before I was ever presented with anything to sign. 6 months of planning. And I'd been in the dark for every day of it. The pieces were assembling. But I had to be patient. And patience does not come naturally to me. The acquisition closed on a Thursday. $50.2 million. I know the exact number because Marcus had obtained it through the legal discovery process we'd initiated. Daniel netted approximately $18 million personally after the deal structure. The aligned investor took most of the rest. I received a wire transfer for $0. Literally zero. The company sent me a termination letter the same day the deal closed. Professional. Polished. Ice cold. But here is what Daniel didn't know. We had already filed. 3 weeks before the close, Marcus had filed a claim in civil court asserting breach of fiduciary duty, violation of preemption rights, and fraudulent misrepresentation in the signing of the restructuring documents. We had the original agreement. We had the recovered email thread showing premeditated intent. And we had a forensic accountant who had traced the exact timeline of when Daniel had begun the restructuring discussions versus when he had assured me that we were better than okay. The deal couldn't be unwound. That ship had sailed. But the proceeds, those could be subject to damages. And damages, Marcus told me, could be significant. The mediation lasted 2 days. I sat across a table from Daniel for the first time since that coffee shop. He didn't look polished this time. He looked like a man who understood that the documentation didn't lie. He settled. I cannot tell you the exact terms. I signed a confidentiality agreement as part of it. What I can tell you is this. The number on that settlement check was enough to clear every dollar of debt I had taken on. Every credit card. My brother's loan. The second mortgage. And then some. It wasn't 18 million. But it was justice. And it was mine. That was a few years ago now. And I want to tell you where I actually landed. Not because it's a perfect ending, but because you deserve the honest version. I started another company. Smaller, quieter, built it with 2 people I'd known for years and trusted completely before we ever signed a single document. We had lawyers review every clause before ink touched paper. I have preemption rights in writing. I have anti-dilution protections that actually hold. I know exactly what I own, down to the decimal. My daughter is older now. She asks about work sometimes. I tell her the simplified version, that someone tried to take something from me and I fought for it, and I got enough back to make it right. She told me recently that she wants to start a business one day. I told her I'd help her read every contract. Daniel. I have no idea what he's doing. I don't look. I genuinely don't think about him much anymore. What he did was calculated and cold, and it nearly destroyed me. But the version of me that exists now, the one who reads every line, who trusts slowly, who knows his worth, that version only exists because of what he did. I would not have built him otherwise. So if you are sitting somewhere right now, wondering if your partner is who you think they are, read the documents. All of them. Tonight, corporate files. Case 002. Status ongoing, because the lesson from this one never really closes. If this story hit home for you, or made you think twice about something in your own life, hit the like button and subscribe to Dossier Karma. Seriously, it takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel more than you know. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you who watches to the end. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever trusted someone completely, in business or in life, only to find out they were playing a completely different game? Tell me in the comments. Every story down there matters. I read them. See you in the next case file.